Every country in the world is buried in debt. The United States currently carries more than $38 trillion in financial burden, the highest level in its history. The European Union holds around $14 trillion, Japan nearly $9 trillion. Even oil-rich Saudi Arabia or export powerhouses like Germany and China carry massive debts. But here is the contradiction. If everyone is in debt, who is the creditor? This is the world of financial history, where money, power, and history intersect, and nothing is as simple as it looks. Financial burden is not just a burden, it is the backbone of the modern world. Every war, every shock, every rise and collapse is built on this invisible debt system. If you follow the financial network long enough, you reach an unsettling truth. The world is not actually in debt to anyone, it is in debt to itself. But that does not mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how we reached a debt swamp exceeding $315 trillion in total financial burden, nearly 3 times the size of the international economic order, we need to go back to the beginning. Long before credit cards and digital transfers, the idea of public debt was born not on Wall Street, but in war. In 1694, England was at war with France and had run out of gold. The king turned to the merchant class for help. In exchange for continuous return payments guaranteed by future levies, merchants financed the crown. To manage this new arrangement, the Bank of England was established. This was revolutionary. The state could now spend money it did not yet possess. In return, lenders received something unique: a government guarantee, a promise that can be bought, sold, and transferred. This marked the birth of the public debt instrument. France copied it. The Netherlands refined it. The newly founded United States adopted it to finance its revolution and westward expansion. National debt was no longer a sign of failure, but a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow was the ability to rule. In the past, dominant powers conquered land to extract gold. Now they issue bonds to extract interest. The battlefield became the balance sheet. Fast forward 3 centuries. Debt has become the world's largest export item. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan exceeds $9 trillion. Global credit usage increases by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country is in debt. Every bank is a creditor. Every citizen, through taxes, savings, and pension funds, is both debtor and creditor. So, who is holding the other end of the rope? Let's start with the United States, because its debt is not just national, it is global. Roughly half of the $38 trillion is publicly held debt, meaning it is owed to investors rather than to government institutions. About 2/3 of these investors are American. Banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the central bank itself. The remaining third, roughly $9 trillion, is held by foreigners. Japan is the largest creditor at around $1 trillion, followed by China with approximately $800 billion. Then come the United Kingdom, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say the U.S. owes China, that is partially true, but it represents only about 2% of the total debt. Most of America's debt belongs to America. The Treasury issues fixed income securities. Banks and funds buy them. The central bank often buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes go toward interest payments on fixed income securities. The interest flows into retirement accounts. It is a circular mirror. The debt is real, but the creditor is largely a reflection of the same system. This cycle is not unique to America. Japan lends to the U.S. through bonds. The US lends to Europe via the IMF. Europe lends to developing countries through the World Bank. Developing nations, in turn, lend back to advanced economies by holding reserves in Western bonds. This is a planet-wide game of hot potato, except the potato is made of promises. Every country holds another country's paper. Every promise is backed by another promise. It is like a poker table that continues as long as no one stands up. But there is a fourth layer: the markets. Behind every government bond lies a vast institutional network. Hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks. They are the true arbiters of credit. They decide who can borrow cheaply and who must pay high interest to survive. When confidence disappears, currencies collapse, governments fall, and economies are restructured overnight. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. And the most powerful actor in this system is the central bank. Central banks do not merely manage debt, they create it. When they buy debt instruments, they create new money. What is a liability on one balance sheet becomes an asset on another. Every unit of currency in circulation represents a debt somewhere else. There's no such thing as debt-free money. This system has survived for decades on confidence. As long as financial actors believe governments will pay interest, even if the principal is never repaid, the machine keeps running. But what happens when confidence breaks? We saw it in Greece, Argentina, and Sri Lanka. Bailouts arrive, but at the cost of austerity, unemployment, and a lost generation. Yet the system resets. Old debts are replaced with new ones. Because in the 21st century, debt is not designed to be repaid. It is designed to be rolled over. Governments treat debt like a subscription, constantly renewed. Interest is the real product, the rent of stability. The United States will never fully repay its debt. Japan has been rolling over its debt for decades. Yet interest rates remain low because bonds are seen as the safest assets. If one day all debts were paid off, the system would collapse. The money supply would shrink, general price decline would begin, and the economy would fall apart. That is why the goal is not to eliminate debt, but to keep it sustainable. Because once confidence disappears, numbers lose their meaning. The real secret is this: the plan was never to repay the debt. The strategy was to convince the world that it would be repaid. But this system does not work equally. Interest payments flow upward. Debt is not just a transfer between countries, but between classes. That is why global debt and inequality rise together. Debtors and creditors are two sides of the same engine. The real problem is what happens when the engine runs out of fuel, because then the question, who is the creditor, stops being abstract and becomes personal. At the top, there's no single face to blame, not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF, all of them, and us. Debt once meant bondage. Today it means balance. But if that balance breaks, we remember what debt truly is: a promise that cannot be kept forever. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. I'll show you where to look.